Right, so UK Platinum. Just gonna read this. Right. Oh, it's about that right. Right. This is the research predicament. The cost of living crisis is affecting everyday life. Um, and then you got how well strikes will bring UK to standstill, right? And then you got all this fear mongering, train chaos, strikes, close Harbour Bushens railways. This is then you got the climate. They're going on the climate issue, right? Exceptional wildlife risk across the UK 11 days ago. Wages dive as inflation scores 6 days ago. Wages wars as UK cost of living crisis bites 5 days ago. This is all planned by the research Agenda 2030. Inflation spikes to the highest in 40 years by the global elite. Right, now I found, I'm going to screen share this because I think it might be helpful to educate oneself. If somebody sees this, I'm show it banned anyway. They're hacking the internet. I've got to be careful what I say, and because I'm going to cough again otherwise. I think people might need to do some homework. Why this is going on? Okay. So you might want to know who you really are in this world of things. I mean, I've covered the time travel subject before, and that's really is important. Agenda 21 is more like Agenda 2030, and I think that is relevant right now. Anyone can go and read on the UN. Where does the European Union come on board? The totalitarian and the communist move to bring the same country in the and to be from the background for education purposes or I get a drink. So sustainable, it's all about sustainability. Clearly explains the connection between sustainability development Agenda 21 as defined by the UN. In-depth research shows how Agenda 21 will be ultimately compromise your property rights for everything, basically. It's worldwide, it's not just in England. So this has all been part of the globalist banking elite's plan and the banking family's plans a long time ago. Okay. You won't, and people's made some really, really good. And why do you think I think it's going automated already? Already here. So the corporation nation, this is all about control. The New World Order globalists taken over America and the world. And this gentleman, it says here, let's have a look. Yeah, I can't talk too long today. It's changed again. I'm waiting for it, but I'm not going to. Let's see this one. It's like the back light on. Well, that's a miracle, isn't it?
How many of you
And
have
the back
children?
light on, it was there again.
And children in school? Let's take a survey. How many people in here would like to have their children be common?
Oh.
No? How about average? What do you think common core actually is? Do you think common, if you have something that's common? Remember when George Bush came along and said, no child left behind? Core is the exact opposite of that. It allows no child to get ahead. It keeps everybody in a very, very tight-knit group. So that no matter where you go in the world, and I say world because this is globalization, but if it's anywhere that you go, you'll get the same exact education. Geographics don't matter. Regions don't matter. Cultures don't matter. Okay, you're getting the same exact standard of education. The lesson plans might be different, but they're all geared towards what is called Common Core standards. What is Common Core? That's the big question. This is
That's weird.
that have a coupling, a train coupling. And really, what it boils down to is Common Core is very much like a train coupling. It is a little piece of paper that allows total privatization takeover of the education system, making it a for-profit industry traded on the stock market. Which is why the budget is getting huger and huger every year. All right? This is done through what's called model legislation, through best practices, and through uniform laws. And we'll explain what that means in a bit. Model legislation, when you hear the word model, that is generally coming from the 21 model legislation. There's groups like American Legislative Council, where corporations and politicians get together, they get wine and dine, they all create this legislation, and then they take that legislation back to their, after being schmoozed. And basically at that point, when you hear the term rubber stamp, basically that's what a Congress is doing. Your local legislators are doing as well, being created outside of government in almost all cases. There's very few laws that are being created inside of government. They are all being created outside of government. This is the little happy face train, and I call it the United Nations, the next stop being globalism. And this is kind of what we see because we're masterfully entertained all the time. Everything. We have reality shows, we have soap operas, we have sitcoms, we have all of this entertainment, we have video games, And so the whole globalization movement looks very much like the happy face. But remember that this is the United Nations, and it's connected to this next train, which is by a little thing called Common Core standards. And it's done through these model legislations, which is Agenda 21. Agenda 21 is sustainable development. The words Agenda 21 and sustainable development are interchangeable. They are the exact same. About United Nations here. You gotta understand this. Can you hear me without the microphone? Yeah, pretty bad. When we're talking about the United Nations, think of the United Nations as the same model as the United States. The United States, we have 50 states, although technically we have 55. We are all in a contractual nature with the United States. The United States is 69 square miles outside of the actual states. It's not a state. It's a corporation, an incorporated district. It is a municipality, a municipal corporation. And it is basically your central government, central corporation. And it protects us. Whereas before we protected ourselves. So when we're talking about the United Nations, nations are called states. If you think of what that means we, as a nation, are a state of a central government, which is the United Nations. That means Zimbabwe and the United States are on equal playing fields. We have a vote each. We are like states of the Union, but the Union now is being transformed into a central global government. That is the United Nations. There's of course a lot more to that, but so I have this picture, and it's a perfect representation of what's happening with Agenda 21 of the United Nations. Now this is our train, and it wraps all the way around into basically the whole landscape. And all around is a pristine, nice forest. No buildings, no nothing. Each one of these cars behind the United Nations steam train is a nation. So you have Australia, you have all the other United Kingdom nations, all countries, in other words. And there's 192, I believe, nations under the United Nations that are members. In other words, they are states of nations. United States being a nation. Again, each one of these is connected through model legislation and uniform laws. And we'll definitely get into what that is. Has anybody seen reserve and corridor biodiversity maps? Okay. This is a map of basically the red zones are places that will be off limits to humans. The yellow zones are buffer zones between those red zones that are highly restricted. This is Agenda 21. The idea is to get all the populations into city centers.
Smart cities.
Is an Agenda 21 city. If you want to write this down, you can go check out the websites. Envision Utah, I believe it's .org or .gov, and there is SLC Green. We're going to explain what some of those happy, feely kind of words. Whenever you hear those are sustainable development. All of this talk about green, sustainable. That's all 21.
There you go.
The idea, these little scattered tiny little pieces are where humans will be allowed to live. And the idea behind Agenda 21 is to actually stack and pack. So notice downtown Salt Lake, especially, you're seeing all these high-rise buildings and apartments. You're not seeing houses, farms, for instance. those farms that you see along this corridor, most of Utah is federal land. So they can remove you under United Nations policies anytime they want to. They will take those farms anytime they want to. I'm working on a farm in Draper and witnessed firsthand eminent domain in the most vile possible way, because they were taking piece by piece of the Fitzgerald farm out there, and are basically putting on the heat to take the whole thing at this point. They will give about a third of the actual property value and call it just compensation. Then they will sell the property. They will use the property to build parking garage and maybe some houses, and then they'll sell the frontage land and make millions in profit. That's your Draper City Council, where I live. So that's basically what's happening. Also, there's a little thing called the Constitution Free Zone. Have you ever heard of that? Yeah, well, this is the United States. Constitution Free Zone. Have you ever heard of that? In the United States. And there's a 100-mile border. That is called the Constitution Free Zone. It's about 2/3 of the entire population. And ironically enough, it's Washington, D.C. The Constitution Free Zone. The Constitution Free Zone is about 197.4 million people, at least. This is probably an old figure. Live within 100 miles of the coastal borders, also the Canadian and the Mexican border. It also extends into Mexico, just so you know. So it's actually a 200-mile border. Constitution Free Zone is an area within 100 miles of U.S. land and coastal borders. Airports throughout the country are also considered U.S. land and coastal borders. So the airport to the coast or border throughout the country, Constitution Free Zone. The Department of Homeland Security has the authority to stop or detain anyone for any reason within a Constitution Free Zone, resident or traveler.
In this presentation, we'll look at how the UN's Agenda 21, or Sustainable Development, affects property ownership. We will also find sources for additional information. As Americans, our property rights matter. Land, buildings, and material goods are the means by which we live. Without rights over our property, we have no rights over our very means of survival, and therefore we are no longer free. Our founding fathers knew this and declared our rights unalienable, meaning no person could ever take them away. So critical are property rights that our Constitution protects them in the Fifth Amendment. No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without the process of law. Individual rights and freedoms are two elements that make America exceptional. Not all nations think that way. Sustainable development was coined in a 1987 report to the UN called Our Common Future. It is defined as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This sounds fine until you read the report. It states, poverty is a major cause and effect of global environmental problems. It then blames nations like the United States for consuming too much and having too much wealth, much of it in the form of private property. The report concludes the only way to make the future sustainable is to reduce America's living standards and transfer our wealth to developing nations.
There you go.
The radical ideas promoted in Our Common Future were codified as Agenda 21 at the 1990 UN Conference on Environment and Development, known as the Rio Earth Summit. 18,000 people from around the world attended. Agenda 21, according to UN literature, is comprehensive nationally and locally by organizations of the UN system in every area in which human beings impact the environment. More than 178 nations adopted Agenda 21, including George H.W. Bush for the United States. Although Congress never approved the program, President Clinton established by executive order the President's Council on Sustainable Development, whose stated purpose was to implement Agenda 21 in the United States. The President's Council on Sustainable Development operated through 1999, but its actions now embedded in every federal agency and influence state and local communities across the United States. President Obama's Executive Order 1356 created the White Council, which further authorized every federal agency to oversee all food, fiber, and energy needs for all rural sustainable communities in America. The UN groups use the terms sustainable development and Agenda 21 interchangeably. Most people never heard of Agenda 21, and here's why. J. Gary Lawrence is a world leader in smart growth. He served as advisor to the President's Council on Sustainable Development. Papers, a strategic planning publication for Agenda 20, Lawrence said, participating in a UN-advocated planning process would very likely bring out many who would actively work to defeat any elected official undertaking global Agenda 21. So we will call our process something else, such as comprehensive growth management or smart growth. And they have. Agenda 21 uses warm and fuzzy names that blind and bylaws like smart growth, open spaces, social justice, to name a few.
Smart roads, smart streets, vision projects, consensus, very important. When Moses came down off the hill and presented the law, which was the Ten Commandments, it was the consensus of God. There was no arguing. These people are acting like gods. When you go, if there was someone here right now, they would be attacking me with fallacy, trying to harm my character. They would tell me I only have 3 minutes to talk to present all this information, and basically say, my information is not positive. It's not touchy-feely, so you know, get off the stage. And it would be ignored. Urbanist communities, public-private partnerships, which we're going to talk a lot about, historic preservation, sustainable communities, open spaces, of all the red and yellow areas, which was probably 85–90% of the entire country, is open spaces. That means man not allowed there, only animals. Walkable communities, social justice, multi-use dwellings. That's your stack package. Greenways, in other words, anything green or even recycling is part of this. High-density urban units and buffer zones.
Regardless of the name, he intends to remove this, called urban sprawl, and replace it with this, want it or not. Agenda 21 means that all states, including the United States, must resolve all environmental disputes peacefully and in accordance with the Charter of the UN, not in accordance with our own nation's laws. Our Constitution says that man's rights are inherent to his nature as a man, and as such are unalienable. This is in direct opposition to the UN Declaration, which holds that man is created by other men and therefore can be taken away by men.
There you go.
Sustainable development's political agenda originates in the UN's founding documents. This is not surprising, since many of the nations represented needed a point of rally around. The UN Charter provided that. Whereas our Declaration of Independence protects our citizens and their labor, the UN Declaration grants government the authority to withhold your property for the good of the community. To implement sustainable development in the United States, unalienable rights such as the right to property must be eroded or struck down altogether. The authors of Agenda 21 that variable human life grouped according to 3 objectives: equity, economy, and the environment. By defining these terms vaguely, a litany of abuses in states, counties, and local communities has resulted. By rubber stamping preconceived plans, the appearance of public buy-in, and grants from sources of questionable is suspect.
So in other words, like I said, they'll wish to reach a consensus. For instance, there's a consensus, in case you didn't hear about global warming. There's a few scientists that have been paying a lot of money to say that global warming is a man-made condition. This is
They-
an important part of Agenda 21. We have to be, before we control, for instance, like horses and cattle are being killed and sterilized because they're supposedly ruining
For instance, like
Montana.
horses and cattle are being
They're sterilizing 90% of the horses, the wild horse population, and they're rounding them up and putting them in corrals. Does that sound familiar? That's the idea of Agenda 21, is to have open spaces. Okay, so we're no different than cattle, really, to these folks. When they have a meeting and they call the public, again, they're going to let your time to speak. They're going to use what's called the Delphi technique. Something you can maybe write down and actually look up yourself. It's actually a very interesting thing, and you'll see why every time, if you've ever gone to a council meeting, you can't get anything out, because I mean you'll see videos of people being arrested just because they want to talk, and that's our so-called democracy. So to develop a consensus of the public, they will have a meeting that's, it's almost a moot point, because nothing in the meeting is really going to be, considered. The plan is already there. The master plan of the community is already changed and will reflect whatever's going to happen in 10 years. The plan is there.
That's
The
right.
meetings, the only reason they have people come and speak at meetings, like people like me, is simply to legitimize what they're doing. They have to do it by law. They have to let you know what they're doing and garner your consent. That is the important part about.
They've already changed their Agenda 2030.
Social equity means using the law to restructure American life. The authors of sustainable development knew their objectives would clash with those of the average U.S. citizen. Therefore, to achieve their objectives, they called for sustainable development is that individual human wants, needs, desires conform to the views and dictates of the planners. Harvey Rubin, executive member of ICLEI, has said that individual rights will have to take a back seat to the collective in the process of implementing sustainable development. The next D is economy. Remember, Agenda 21's core purpose is the international redistribution of wealth and the creation of public-private partnerships. Maurice Strong, at his opening speech at Agenda 21 Earth Summit in 1992, said current styles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class involving high meat intake, use of fossil fuels, appliances, home and
That's why the question comes.
are not sustainable.
Get rid of the middle
Agenda
class as well.
21 preamble. The developmental objectives of Agenda 21 will require substantial flow of new and additional funds to developing countries. This declaration mandates that the conditions of the poor are to well taken from the rich, in this case, U.S. property owners. Sustainable development planners use conservation easements, eminent domain, reauthoring of investor community plans, enhanced regulations, and millions of dollars in grant money to acquire private properties, the means to redistribute wealth in theory and practice. This is effectively lowering the U.S. standard to that of the rest. Agenda 21 said equity will be achieved through implementation of the international economic order and through transfers of resources to developing countries. In addition to its appeal for international redistribution of wealth, sustainable development restructures the economy by replacing our free enterprise system with public-private partnerships. Public-private partnerships provide lucrative contracts for those companies partnering with the government and government agencies, while non-partnered companies struggle to survive against their subsidies, regulations, tax breaks, and insider privileges. With it goes the free market system.
So many people are familiar with the NSA Center that just got built. Do you know there's a massive spy center built right in your backyard? It's actually my backyard, about 10, 15 miles up the road. Well, with the public-private partnerships, so now you have the NSA, which is the federal government. But what people might not notice is that they're also Microsoft, Adobe, Apple, and many other corporations, private corporations that do all of the internet telephone system are also moving to Utah. So what's happening is that Utah is giving exactly what this just said: tax breaks, limited liability status, easy federal access, monopolies, subsidies, and large contracts. So anyone else trying to compete will have to go through the old system, which is paying taxes and everything else. A good example is General Electric. In 2010, General Electric, this massive international corporation, paid 0 taxes. Why is that? Well, the CEO of General Electric
Sure.
became the jobs czar for President Obama. The other thing about that, which I'm not going to go into today, but you can go to my website to learn about the CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, and the investment structure of government. Government is the main shareholder in just about every corporation in the world, through the pension system and through massive investment holdings. A good way to look at it is to look at the pension system. Pensions last year, taxpayers alone, not the employees, taxpayers paid into the federal pension system almost, I think it was $980 billion, almost $1 trillion of taxpayer money goes into the pension system. All of that money is used in the form of investments into stock, foreign corporations, foreign currency, real estate, exactly what he's talking about. So for the last, since 1946, since this investment scheme really got started, government has just been continually purchasing everything on Earth. And,
they want to own it all.
my website, if you want to
Ownership.
learn about that, because that'll change your whole perspective. My website is thecorporationnation.com. You can watch films there. Again, I'm not selling anything. These are free. It's my research, nothing else. And the first movie was called The Corporation Nation. The second movie was called The Great Pension, where you can see for yourself all of the ownership in these corporations. So it's naturally an incentive for government to give tax breaks to corporations that own stock in, because then going to get gains. It's a natural conclusion in the conflict of interest that government promote, say, things like vaccines and genetically foods, because government is the investor, stock investor, collectively across the world in all of these pharmaceutical companies, both domestic and foreign. Monsanto.
This is on YouTube already. So, artificially grown food, GM, and big farm industry companies, big corporations control energy, ramp up the prices, and I'm talking about UK, create poverty, create smart, push the agenda, smart meters. Oh, it will save you money. No, it controls everything you use in your home, monitors everything you use in your home. And how much are the standing charges? So, I mean, you got anything smart, like you heard. StopTheCrime.net's a good website. Deborah Lovato is also, it goes into a lot of this. And then why they're creating the climate change agenda. Because it's going to be another taxable proposal. Well, these corporations, the CEOs, the head of the companies, I reckon, and the ordinary Joe Block is the one that's going to be affected negatively by this.
Diebold, the machines that you vote on, governments that corporate stock investment. Now, of course, there's Microsoft, good example. Last time I checked, 25% owned by institutional shareholders. That's the pension system, government investments, and then government is the main investor in most mutual funds out there, from Vanguard and all those big funds. Bill Gates owns 2% at the most. He's not the head of that. He does not make the decisions for that corporation. Corporations are run by what's called corporate governance, very similar to what the United Nations is doing. All the shareholders have what's called proxy vote, and they vote for what's happening in the corporations. They vote for boards of directors. If the CEO gets out of line, the board of directors, which are put there by shareholder votes, which are mostly government institutional holders and private ones, they'll get rid of the CEO because they'll tell the board of directors what they want through their votes. They vote on mergers and acquisitions. We're talking banks here too, by the way. Government is the main holder of stock in banks.
Okay.
Again, this is a collective effort throughout the world. This will make a lot more sense when we get to the social security system and you see how that works.
Sustainable development plays according to the Rio Declaration. Human needs are at the center of concerns for sustainable development. We are only entitled to a healthy life if it is in harmony with nature. It continues. To achieve sustainable development, states should reduce and eliminate unsustainable patterns of production and consumption. Support laws to protect the environment. Sustainable development uses the environmental movement as the means to promote a political agenda. ICLEI is the non-governmental organization tasked with rolling out sustainable development. Their action plan restructures the world's governments so that all people will be the citizens of a global collective. The implementation many individual and property rights. Once fully implemented, ordinary people will be left unprotected from de facto decrees placing nature above man while relegating man to the status of a biological resource. The method of implementing sustainable development in communities is alarming. Projects are often initiated by groups such as ICLEI or the American Planning Association, who create fear over problems portrayed as a crisis. Farmland development, urban sprawl, poor water management, wildlife conservation, or on the freeway are examples. Stakeholder council meetings are typically arranged under the auspices of soliciting input from community members. Often these headquarters of the plan. Surveys poll a small number of residents and include loaded questions such as, which of the following areas do you think should be protected or acquired? A typical stakeholder council meeting is run by a trained facilitator. His job is not to enter all views into the record, but to guide the group to a predetermined consensus. Tactics vary between facilitators, but consensus generally is reached by subtly marginalizing opposition while recording the good ideas and allowing criticism only for the bad ones. Once a problem has been identified, every nonprofit and local government has a vast stock of boilerplate solutions at hand, enabling them to identify problems with the goal of implementing predetermined outcomes and sustainable development policies. The same stock of solutions are in Stockholm, Santa Cruz, or anywhere in the world. ICLEI, whose mission is to help local governments implement sustainable development, has worldwide offices and operates in 600 U.S. communities. Today, every county in the United States has sustainable development directives guided by federal agencies, NGOs, and/or ICLEI. NGOs often gain local community compliance with promises of funding grants. Their list of money sources is impressive and includes the Nature Conservancy, the Sierra Club, the National Audubon Society, the American Planning Association, and the National Teachers Association. Over 2,000 NGOs are accredited by the United Nations for the purpose of implementing sustainable development in America. They receive massive tax advantages from the IRS.
NGO means non-governmental organization.
This map shows the UN's vision for our country's land use when sustainable development is fully implemented.
So basically, as you kind of heard there, Agenda 21 is being implemented everywhere. It doesn't really matter whether you're not going to see it. And ironically, I've had several council members from around this area approach me to have me, of all people, I know education background whatsoever in accounting or anything, to have me explain what they're planning to report. is the CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. One of the most important things anybody can know about is the CAFR. So councilmen will come to me and have me explain and show them where the local government and the county and the state is hiding literally billions of dollars, all in investment funds. So what's ironic is that most councilmen are clueless about Agenda 21. They don't know that within every council, as this video was just saying, within every council, in every government council, there's almost always a member of ICLEI, which I can't remember what it stands for right now, which is a front for Agenda 21. And he is the one that is guiding meetings. He's the one that's using what's called best practices to employ, again, the Delphi technique, so that the public
Global
has
Cities
no
Network. Wow.
input whatsoever as to what's going on. And most importantly to know, is that most things that are happening today, most policies that are being passed, laws that are being passed, stadiums that are being built, the housing developments that are being built, none of this anymore, nothing government does, hardly at all, requires voter approval.
Wow.
No voter approval. It's all done through public-private partnerships, what's called lease agreements. An example of a lease agreement would be Chicago. Chicago sold off their parking garages and their parking meters to JP Morgan. So they entered into a public-private partnership with JP Morgan Chase. So now the parking garages and the parking meters, basically it's like $25 to park for half an hour in Chicago. That's because JP Morgan Chase now runs it. So what the city did was they said, okay, we're going to enter into a lease agreement with JP Morgan Chase. They're going to pay us, let's say $5 billion today, and we're going to let them run the parking garage and keep all the profits for the next 50 years. Well, there's no regulation that says they can't raise the price, which is why the parking meters went up so high, which is why you're going to see your toll lanes out here, your, what do they call it, the commuter lanes, the carpool lanes. A lot of those are being turned into toll lanes. Well, what do you think those tolls are that you see? You can buy a card to ride in the carpool lane with only one person. Well, that's a public-private partnership with some corporation. I don't know what. So basically, we get $5 billion today, and our infrastructure asset is now privatized. JP Morgan Chase hires a bunch of foreign workers, and now we have a privatized public structure. Okay, by 50 years, they're going to make 20, 30, 40 billion dollars, with all revenue that was supposed to come back according to the original plan to the taxpayer. Instead, it's JP Morgan Chase. We get a hefty sum of money today, and guess what? All that money gets put into investment funds. Because suddenly you say, hey, folks, we have $5 billion. We don't need to charge you taxes this year. We can fix all the potholes. Well, then there goes all the money. See, government invests all of your taxpayer money it can, but it can say, as a nonprofit, well, we didn't make any profit this year because it's all over here in the investments. Just like you don't have to pay capital gains until you sell your stock, you use government. And so we're basically in a situation where, like any manager of any company that has a bunch of wealth that comes into him, he's going to say, "Wow, I have $5,000 left over this year. Well, I can't justify asking for more money, so I'm going to spend that $5,000 on a bunch of pens from a store. It doesn't really matter. I just need to show the boss that I spend all of my budget. And then I'm going to spend maybe $3,000 more and put us in debt in our department so that I can justify asking for more money the next year." That's what has been with you and your taxpayer money. It is collecting through fees, non-governmental activities like golf courses, sewers, and stuff like that, districts, and taking that money, putting it into the general fund, and then it's gone. It just disappears into the ether. And the budget report doesn't show that, only the comprehensive annual financial report. Again, if you want to check that out and understand that, thecorporationnation.com has documentaries there that you can watch. Let's here. How much time you guys got? Am I boring you? All right. The United Nations, it infiltrates through treaties, compacts, private contracts, and it does so under international law, private maritime and admiralty law. Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2 of the Constitution says the President shall have power by and with the and consent of the Senate to make treaties, provided 2/3 of the senators present concur with the treaty. There's a problem here. A properly legally concluded U.S. treaty overrules state law. So the federal treaty overrules state law, and any state commission, not the federal constitution, not the main gig there. So a U.S. treaty, meaning the national treaty, cannot forbid to overrule the United States Constitution or abrogate sovereignty of the United States. If it does, it's a bona fide treaty. It can't exist in reality. It's a usurpation, basically. It is. It's not under the authority of the United States to make such a treaty of sovereignty of the United States. So treaties made or which shall be made, it says the Constitution, that violate the U.S. Constitution by subjugating the United States to an outside power like the United Nations are prohibited and thus null and void. Well, so that's trick, and that's why Italy and other organizations, thousands of organizations, are infiltrating on the local and state level. You see, because they can't infiltrate necessarily into the federal government other than put their people there and to wine and dine politicians. So they have to attack us on the local level. That's why you have an ICLEI member in every city council. That's why you have all of these best practices coming to the state and local level, because states can be changed. The federal Constitution is very specific that it cannot be changed, but the state can't. You're about to just okay. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18 of the Constitution. The Congress shall have the power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for the carrying execution of the foregoing powers, and all powers vested by the Constitution and the government of the United States or in any department or officer thereof. Okay? The word necessity. The law of necessity is actually one of the maxims of law. An example is, if I don't want to be a taxpayer, and yet I still need money to survive and buy food, by necessity, the moral imperative to not use such a corrupt system of currency and support the whole system that enslaves me goes by the wayside, because without it, I will die. I have to use currency, the Federal Reserve notes, to buy food. That would be an example of necessity. So when Congress uses the word necessity, necessary and proper, it literally does the same thing, and it uses all kinds of excuses to make that happen. So again, they have to attack the local level, the state level. They cannot attack the federal government like they can us here in the local municipalities. Now, the Articles of Confederation says each state retains its sovereignty, freedom, and independence, every power, jurisdiction, and right, which is not by this confederation expressly delegated. Some Continental Congress had no powers except those which were actually given to them in the Articles of Confederation. Well, the necessary and proper clause in the Constitution gives this power to Congress to do exactly what I said. Well, sorry, we're gonna usurp your rights because it's necessary. We're gonna eminent domain your property because it's necessary to the good. No other clauses do this in the Constitution. Really. creates an unlimited loophole to create what is deemed necessary laws and treaties, even when they're against the ideals of the Constitution. So as long as it doesn't change the actual function of government, doesn't mean that the treaty has to come. Uh, Gold's Gym. So I think that's what the Matrix. My interpretation of it is discovering your own side, and realizing that when you get out of the Matrix, there is no entertainment. It's just a really bland. It's nature. It's beautiful, but it's not all this entertainment and smartphones and everything else. You see, that's my interpretation.
The International Social Security Association provides access to information, practical guidelines, and platforms for members to build and promote dynamic social security systems worldwide. The vision of dynamic social security provides a framework for the ISSA's action. Dynamic social security refers to social security systems that are accessible, adequate, socially inclusive, and economically productive, and that are based on performing well-governed, and innovative social institutions. And with the nature of the ISSA as an association of social security institutions, the vision of promoting dynamic social security ties social security improvements to the capacities and performance of these institutions. The effort by the ISSA is very much supported by the World Bank. The Social Protection Unit, as part of the Human Development Network, supports the World Bank and client countries to assist individuals, households, and communities to better manage the income and welfare risks that affect vulnerable groups. The unit is charged with developing concepts and strategies for social protection policy and with carrying out support functions in operation for largely the area of disabilities, labor market, pensions, safety nets, and social funds. In all these areas, the unit provides operational support to the visions and leadership for strategy development and results, knowledge management, training, and development partnership. So what exactly is this Human Development Network? The Human Development Network is the World Bank's home for policy programs and research in the fields of education, health, nutrition, and population, social protection, children and youth, HIV, and its mission is to assist low and middle-income country governments to individually and collectively increase the investment in people with a view of driving faster and more equitable. The Human Development Network is dedicated to actively participate in global efforts to contribute to poverty reduction through improving access to education, social services, to build balanced and competitive society. Once again, this is the taking away of one nation and giving it to the other, so that no nation can get ahead, just like
so that no nation more worries about U.S. involvement with the international. Since the 1970s, the United States has established a network of bilateral, in other words, agreements between two countries, social security agreements that coordinate the U.S. Social Security program with the comparable programs of other countries. This will give a brief overview of the agreement of particular interest. This is right from the official security website of the United States. I have a list of countries that we are in agreements with, and what this means is that the United States and the country that I'm going to name have a bilateral agreement, a contract that says, if I move over here, I'm still going to pay Social Security over here. And if this person in this country or nation moves over here, the government here will pay their Social Security over here. That way, all the investment funds can continue to go. Italy, Germany, Switzerland, Belgium, Norway, Canada, United Kingdom, which is the whole, Australia and everything, Spain, France, Portugal, Netherlands, Austria, Finland, Ireland, Luxembourg, Greece, South Korea, Chile, Australia, Japan, Denmark, the Czech Republic, and Poland. So if you move to any of those first world countries, you're not going to escape of Social Security. I want to say one other thing. International Social Security Association welcomes UN resolution on universal health care. Now, you got to think about this for a moment. Obamacare is universal health care. This was not just something that Obama thought of and said, hey, I want to do it. No, universal health care is very much like Social Security. They want everybody in the healthcare system. The best way to control people is through their medical records. In order to have medical records on everybody, you have to be a part of the Social Security. You have to have a number. You're a commodity, in other words. So, if you think about this, well, let me read this here. The ISA voted the adoption of the UN General Assembly resolution on affordable universal health care, which further recognizes access to basic Social Security services. Obamacare was in Title 42 of U.S. Code. Title 42 is called the Public Health and Welfare. You might remember the word welfare from the Constitution. It's a capitalized word, meaning it's a proper noun, and it refers to a specific form of welfare. That's the welfare that we have, from Medicare to Social Security to unemployment and everything else. Well, a big part of that welfare, of course, is the access to care. The difference is that Obamacare isn't about giving you access to health care. Obamacare is about forcing you into yet another investment fund called insurance. Whether it's Social Security, medical insurance, homeowners insurance, auto insurance, these are all, remember this, folks, these are all investment funds. They play on the fact that you get a benefit. If you go to any court case that talks about the benefits that you receive from government, the court's opinion will always be that if you accept the benefit, you must also accept the averments and everything else that comes with that benefit. You have a duty to a lot of rules if you accept Social Security, if you accept Medicare, if you accept all these things, if you accept universal health care. It's very similar to municipalities accepting federal money. By accepting the money, they have to follow a specific set of rules that dictates where that goes. If you accept Social Security, you have to follow a specific set of dictates of the contract to how you can spend that money, the amount of taxes you're going to have to pay back into the system. It's the same model over and over and over and over again. And again, it's a massive investment. How do you get everybody in the world to contribute voluntarily, quote unquote, to the government's investment scheme? You create benefits. That's what this is all about. So most of Obamacare is in Title 42, which is the same code as Social Security, because the two are completely intertwined. We're not going to be without the Social Security number is the point. And that's going to be on a worldwide basis. Now, remember the section, we're going to really talk about core and how this works. We're going to be talking about nonprofits, tax-exempt private associations, non-governmental organizations, which are the NGOs. Those include the Sierra Club, the World Wildlife Fund, your Greenpeace, all of those. Those are all used as weapons to take over land. You remember the train picture that I showed you? Where the train's winding through the forest, and the forest is perfect, no houses, no nothing, it's just untouched. Again, that's what the goal is here, is to get everybody onto the little pieces of land that are designated for use, and everything else is going to be used for wildlands restoration. What you don't know is that a large part of our national park system, we don't think of that as an altruistic effort to preserve land. But what that really was the federal takeover of land. Simple as that. It's a piece of paper on the land. It says, well, no. You're realize how many natural resources are on those lands? Do you have any idea how valuable that land, as far as the mineral estate and oil? America has more oil on its lands, especially in its federal lands and the Bureau of Land Management land, than, from what I understand, through the reserve up there, and it's being tapped right now in North Dakota, that we would never be dependent on anything. So the idea is to get that land and that value away from the people into federal hands. The only way to do that is to deregulate the areas, whether that's force, where they killed the Indians, whether that's through Agenda 21, sustainable development, moving all the people into pack and high-rises. So they use groups like the Sierra Club and all of these wildlife, what do they call endangered species, that kind of thing, in order to falsely claim that the land should not be inhabited anymore or never should. And then, of course, that land is taken, put into federal care and receivership. And unfortunately, a lot of our public parks or our federal lands are being sold or put into lease agreement with corporations, oil corporations, gold mining corporations. That's what's happening. That's the importance of Agenda 21, to use these non-governmental associations as experts. If I were to go and try to talk against the experts, I would be laughed off the stage, because the experts are the ones that reach consensus. Remember, public-private partnerships, uniform laws, best practices, and the master plan, which we talked about. The first and foremost, most important thing of this whole presentation, the backbone of everything, right here. George Bush, in April 30th, 1992, Executive Order number 12803, 12803, called Infrastructure Privatization. By authority vested in me as President, by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, that's a loose statement, and in order to ensure that the United States achieves the most beneficial economic use of its resources, and mineral estate or resources, and real estate, it is hereby ordered as follows. I'm going to read definitions of what's happening here. Okay, infrastructure privatization. Remember, we talked about the parking garages and the parking meters. Section 1, definitions. The purpose of this order, privatization means the disposition or transfer of infrastructure assets, such as by sale or by long lease, which is what they did with JP Morgan Chase, from a state or local government to a private party.
Yeah, true.
It's local government. Remember that. Because remember, you have to tackle the local level, not the federal level. And when states accept money from the federal government, guess what? They're now bound to submit to infrastructure privatization. What is an infrastructure asset? Now this list very carefully, because this is all of the assets of infrastructure that your fathers and hopefully you built. Infrastructure asset means any asset financed in whole or in part from government and needed for the functioning of the economy. Examples of such assets include, but are certainly not limited to, roads, tunnels, bridges, electricity supply facilities. Remember that list you read at the beginning? Mass transit, rail transportation, airports, ports, waterways, which again, a waterway can technically be land or concrete or anything else. Just depends how you define it. Supply facilities, recycling and wastewater treatment facilities, solid waste disposal facilities, and the last, or the most, is this is your everyday life. Housing. When your houses are built, unbeknownst to you, a big old lien is put on your own personal property, your own mortgage. It's an invisible lien. It's the top position, and it protects or collateralizes the building of all these new homes and all these stack them and pack them 21 houses. The Second one is schools. Schools are an infrastructure asset that can be privatized through sale or long-term lease. So all the money, you see all these fancy schools that are going up, right? All the new schools used to be that the buildings were there and there was never a budget. Well, see, what's happening is they're going around the taxpayer and they're entering into these lease agreements, private-public partnerships, and now corporations are building schools. And remember, government is loaning the money to the corporations through your taxpayer money, through corporate bonds, and then they're coming back and saying, we're coming to the rescue. We're going to enter into government contract with you into a public-private partnership, and we're going to save the day. We're going to build you a new school. Unbeknownst to you, the school is no longer run by government. Prisons. Anybody heard of the private prison industry? You know, there was a memo that went back not too long ago to all 48 governors of this area, not Alaska and Hawaii. I can't remember the term for that. It said, hey governors, we want to privatize the prison industry. We're willing to offer you so many $1 million, and all you have to do is sign a contract. The contract says, now that the prison is privatized, the state taxpayers, through the governor and the legislature, has to guarantee that the private corporation release agreement that's running the private prisons receives has 90% of its beds or cells filled. Okay, now if you think about that for a minute, that means that whether those cells are filled or not, taxpayers are going to pay that private corporation to run that prison at 90% capacity no matter what. If it's more than that, they'll get more money. If it's less than that, they're guaranteed 90%. Well, what does that create? It creates conflict of interest. It means that it's in the best interest of the government to arrest people for what we call victimless crimes. Let's say you're smoking pot or not harming anyone, in jaywalk, whatever. Put you in prison and make you work at 45 an hour for prison labor wages. Okay, that is privatization of prisons. Last one is hospitals. Okay, that's very important considering universal health care, because what we discovered is that hospitals are getting away with the whole idea behind this universal health care stuff is to put everybody into insurance. What insurance does is limit your rights. You've accepted a contract, you must accept the duties that come with that contract. That means that you no longer have the right to go into a hospital and demand to be treated for life-threatening illnesses or injuries under the Hippocratic Oath. Hippocratic Oath is important oaths in history. It means that a doctor cannot just look at them and say, no, just let them die on the waiting room floor. Okay? Right now, I would say that an illegal alien, if there is such a thing, an illegal alien has more rights than anyone that's in an insurance plan. Because an illegal alien, if they are hurt, they have a broken bone, they can walk into any non-profit hospital. That's the important part. A non-profit hospital must, under the law and under the Hippocratic Oath, treat that. Okay, that is a human right, not a citizen's right. Everything else is a benefit of insurance and citizenry. And this is why, through Obamacare, you can walk into a hospital and not be treated because you're under an insurance plan. That's the trick. Get rid of the Hippocratic Oath. So what we're seeing is a bunch of hospitals being built for profit as clinics and as big hospitals with no emergency room. You really have to go to the emergency room to be treated under the Hippocratic Oath, to be treated non-profit. Non-profit means they can't charge for their services. Anything that's non-profit, even the Mormon churches, Deseret Industries, the thrift stores, they cannot, by law, charge for anything that comes out of that store. It's non-profit. The price that you pay is a suggested price. It's a donation. You cannot force someone to pay a donation. Same with hospitals. If you're a non-profit hospital, you must obey the most important oath in history, which is the Hippocratic Oath. This is the importance of Obamacare. If you think about it, I mean, think of all the nuclear radiation tests, think of the vaccine damage, think of all the harm that government has actually done. The best thing that government can do is to put you in an insurance plan that's sponsored by government and then limit your ability to sue government to treat you for all the damage it's caused. That's unfortunately the backbone of Obamacare and worldwide universal health care. All right, so we know now that housing, schools, most importantly, for this discussion, prisons, hospitals, and everything else that we see out there, because this is not a complete list, are up for sale or for long-term lease. It doesn't matter your taxpayer dollars built these things, that your fathers might have died in the construction of these. They can go to China. They can go to any private businessman. And finally, state and local governments. Under Executive Order 12803, privatization. State and local governments means the government of any state, United States, District of Columbia, any Commonwealth territory, possession of the United States, and any country, municipality, town, township, local public authority, school, special district, interstate district, regional and interstate. You probably don't even know half of these exist. Council of governments, and any agency or instrumentality of a local government, and any federally recognized Indian tribe. The big fallacy with Indian land is that it belongs to the Indians, and actually that's not the case. In the actual constitutions of each state and enabling acts for those constitutions, you see that those Indian lands are indeed owned by the federal United States. So a state and local government can be a school district. So that means that anything in the school district can be privatized. The important thing about districts is that they have a whole different set of laws and rules and regulations that can be manipulated to heck and back. So it's good to put all the into a district. That's why you have water districts and sewer districts. They are very easy to manipulate and hide wealth and investments within the funds they use. So we call this sort of reimagining government. Non-profit, tax-exempt private associations that are non-governmental in nature. Well, that's the Bar Association. The association is a private association. And guess what? That's what the courts are. Courts are not governmental, they are private, and they're run by the Bar Association. The Bar Association is actually part of the Department of Justice in the executive branch. We really don't have a third branch of government. It's sort of an illusion because literally the Bar Association is part of the executive branch, not the judicial. I'm not even sure the Supreme Court is part of the judicial anymore, but don't quote me on that. So there's a building, and this goes to your question. There's a building called the State Services Organization, okay? SSO.org. About section, it says, the staff, State Services Organization, SSO, welcomes you to the Hall of the States. This is in Washington, D.C. Conveniently located just blocks from the U.S. Capitol and Union Station, the Hall of the States is home to many Washington offices of the 50s. You get that? Yeah. An office, Washington, D.C. Technically, Utah, D.C. If we're talking the paper aspect of it. Historians, associations, the state officials also. State Services Organization, which manages the 225,000 square feet of office space that makes up the Hall of States, is proud to offer a broad range of services to more than 90 organizations. When you go to the list, which would be there, but it's not, we see Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Florida, Guam, Indiana, all the way down the list. Utah on that list. But I guarantee you that it's somewhere in Washington, D.C. in another building. It's at universities, California State University. Why in the heck would California State University have an office in Washington, D.C.? Carnegie Mellon University, Cornell University, Kent State, on down the list. But then we get to the most important part, which is associations. Okay, now remember, one of those on this list is the National Governors Association. So, your politicians form a private, non-governmental association. They all go over here and they meet in Washington, D.C. They collaborate, they conspire, they're non-partisan, they drop their political parties. Political parties, by the way, Democrat and Republican parties, those are non-governmental private associations. The whole of government is handled in non-governmental private associations. As long as we're of these private associations, we retain the legal status of voter, and all this stuff is going to continue. So I'm very against any form of political party that is a registered non-governmental private association. That includes the Libertarian Party, formed by the Koch brothers, as well as the Tea Party. Ron Paul was actually one of the first leaders of the, can't remember the name of it, but it was a Koch brother venture. So I guess what I'm telling you is the thought that we still have this traditional government. I talk too much. The thought that we have this traditional government left over from the days of the Constitution and all that statism and patriotism, just throw it out the window. That's not what we have anymore. It only exists in the heart anyway. Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations, Association of State and Territorial Solid Waste Management Officials, Association of California Water Agencies, American Urological Association, American Speech Language Hearing Association. Here's where it comes. National Alliance of State and Territorial AIDS Directors, National Association of Clean Air Agents, of development organizations, of federally impacted schools, of insurance commissioners. Those are political offices. National Association of Secretaries of State, National Association of State Budget Officers, of state auditors, comptrollers, and treasurers, state foresters, state retirement guides, of state legislators, the National Black Caucus of State Legislators. You see, every single aspect of government is here in this building. They all meet and they all create uniform legislation like Common Core. And once they're done with that, they copyright it, and then they get back over to the states, and individually in each state, Common Core now is 45 states that have approved Common Core standards. And in order to do that, they must contract with a non-governmental private association called the National Governors Association, who owns the copyright. Okay. So when you hear the term, again, rubber stamp, when Congress or legislatures of the state rubber stamp something, it literally means that they have met in private, outside of the law, created their own legislation, they bring it back, and they do this. That's why you think they're innocent. Well, I don't know. Well, let's pass it over. Now, we think they're stupid. We've been trained through media, through reality shows, through movies, games, everything, books, that these people are stupid. And here they are, provably fighting together, losing the illusion of partisanship. That's for you folks. That's to divide you folks. I'm a Republican. I'm a Democrat. It It's nothing. It doesn't mean anything. So let me read you the State Services Organization. 1976 is a joint measure of the Council of State Governments, a private association, National Conference of Legislatures, a private association, and the National Government Association. Our mission is to provide our tenants with superior service. The National Government Association Center for Best Practice develops innovative solutions to today's most pressing public policy challenges. The mission of the NGA Office of Federal Relations is to ensure government's views are represented in shaping of federal policy. Positions reflecting governor's principles on priority issues. Association work. What does this mean? It means non-governmental associations, private associations, are lobbying groups. So this is the irony here. The governors and all the other levels of government, mayors and everything else, they meet, they conspire, they create legislation, uniform acts, best practices, all that, all coming from United Nations Agenda 21, Sustainable Development Principles. Just go back to their states and pass the laws. They literally lobby themselves. Is that hard to imagine? Can you imagine lobbying yourself? They're literally taking off their hat as governor, going way over here outside of any law, firing, and they're actually going back, putting the hat back on, and going, so what you bring me? Take the hat off. Well, here's Common Core standards. Put the hat on. Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more. Take the hat off. They're lobbying themselves, folks. These are lobby organizations. It's hard to imagine that our government has got to this point, a complete takeover happening under everyone's noses. But this is reality. Who are we? National Government Association website, straight from the mouths of the governors. Founded in 1908. The National Governors Association, NGA, is the collective voice of the nation's governors and one of the DC's most respected public policy organizations. Public policy organization is a lobby. Its members, right? Members are the governors. This gave me what I just read. Its members are the governors of the 55 states. How many people knew there were 55 states? Territories and commonwealths. NGA provides governors. Okay. NGA provides governors and senior staff members with services that range from representing states on Capitol Hill and before the administration on key federal issues to developing and implementing innovative solutions to public policy challenges. Did you get that? The membership consists of the 50 governors, and the 50 governors then provide governors and their senior staff with services. What is going on here? They're self-lobbying. I don't know if that's clear. It's just ridiculous. Mission National Association website. National Government Association, NGA, is a bipartisan organization. That means shed the artificiality of corporate, non-governmental private associations that are Democratic and Republican. Are a bipartisan organization. Governors share best practices. Where do we hear that? Speak with a collective voice, national policy, and develop innovative solutions that improve state government and federalism. Your governors support federalism. What does that mean? That means your governors support central government over state government. What we do, and from their website, through NGA, governors identify priority issues like Common Core and deal collectively with matters of public policy and governance at the state and national levels. Remember, government are two different things. Governance is what, corporate governance is what the pension fund managers do when they proxy vote in corporation shareholders. That's governance. There's a difference between governance. When they are in Washington, D.C., they are part of it. When they're private associations, they're acting as governments. They're taking off the hat. From the Common Core State Initiative's website, again, Common Core itself is so insignificant when you look at it for just what it is, which is standards of education. What should children be learning? Okay, it's not education in and of itself. It just says, here are the standards. This is what we should be learning. Now, come on, private corporations, give me your bids. Come on, Microsoft, give me your bids. Let's privatize everything. So again, it's the hook, it's the coupling that holds the whole corporate structure together. Without Common Core, a lot of this stuff couldn't happen.
Shout at him.
So now, because we have Common Core standards, we need products. We need the standards. All right? Well, what does that mean? Well, that means that organizations have to now create educational things, books, all kinds of things. One of the reasons I'm here, where did she go? One of the reasons I'm here is because wasn't it you that told me about the book in the library that you're trying to find? What was the name of that book? What's that? Yeah, and I looked it up and I found out that it's basically lesbianism, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's what's in the school shelves. That's why she contacted me, because I think you had an article of mine on Common Core. That's why we're all here today, because she tried to get that book out of the library. A little bit stuff. Yeah. And it's still there to this day, right? Yeah. Well, I'll tell you. The core website, which is part of the National Government Association, says to properly cite Common Core state standards, use the following citation. Authors, National Governors Association Center for Best Practices, and the Council of Chief State School Officers. The association that meets in the SSO building in Washington, D.C. So all the chief state school officers are in this too. Common Core state standards. Notice it's not federal standards. Publisher, National Government Association Center for Best Practice, and the CCSSO, Washington, D.C., publishing a copyright date 2010. You know, if there's a copyright on something, that means it's not public. It means it's private. Common Core state standards are private. They're part of a private association. Copyright page are the terms of use provided by the National Government Association Center for Best Practices. So content on the website, including in particular the Common Core state standards, are the property of the National Governors Association and the CC and National Government Association Center and CCSSO right, title, interest in, and name. And again, folks, if something's copyrighted, the dollar bill is copyrighted. Public license for use of Common Core state standards. Use of Common Core state standards is permitted by the National Governors Center and CCSSO, which we'll cover in a second, pursuant to and subject to the terms of a public license, which is available on this website. Access to the site is strictly monitored. By me going to this site and using it today in my dark presentation, by actually taking a picture of this site, I might be breaking the law, just to let you know. You might be accomplices to me breaking the law because the National Governors Center and the CCSSO reserve the right to refuse any access to the site or any of its resources. Okay? That means, again, that in order to use these things, you have to get permission of a private, non-governmental association. How many times can I say that? No one's thrown up yet, so I'm not angry enough yet. From the Council of Chief State School Officers, talking about Common Core standards, created the Network for Transforming Educator Preparation, NEP, to support states ready to take action in key policy areas to ensure all educators are ready on the first day of their career to prepare students for college, work, and life. The Chief State School Officers is a nonpartisan, nationwide, nonprofit organization of public officials who head departments of elementary and secondary education in the states, etc. Oh, actually, no. The secondary education in the state of Columbia, the Department of Defense is all under standards and 5 U.S. extra-state jurisdictions. It provides leadership assistance on major educational issues. The Council seeks member consensus on major educational issues and expresses their views to civic and professional federal agencies, Congress, and the public. For Agenda 21. I want to read you a list of partners. Okay, these are listed as CCSSO corporate partners. What is that? Public-private partnership. Microsoft. Microsoft believes that every student has the right to education. It also believes in vaccinating all of Africa and sterilizing it. Albeit grand, to help students and educators realize their potential. What it really wants to do is enter into a public-private partnership and sell computers. Because if every kid in the nation, all, I don't know, 100 million of them has a Microsoft computer, and they can charge more for it by the time. It's wonderful. You may work that buy all the computers for kids. Promethean company helps in educational transformation by technology to provide data-driven, evidence-based instructional instrument systems. Math, science, geometry. That's what it used to be. But now we leverage technology to provide data-driven, evidence-based instructional improvement systems. Yes, sir.
Okay, so again, this is so yes. Over here for the kids that can rewrite the history and number one. The original history is gone. So many people there, the kids all they go to the military, all the countries, don't know nothing.
Well, that's the important part about having Common Core in the military, is because they want to grow up as peacekeepers. World to ensure that the whole society is that everybody's equal, no one gets ahead, except of course the people who the elites, if you will. Yeah, you're witnessing history being changed. Just what we call Lincoln, completely inaccurate. It tells you asked by an esteemed and respected colleague to go over the comprehensive annual financial report for the school district.
History that can happen from one day to the next. They already did a movie about killing Osama bin Laden. They already did a movie about history that happened yesterday.
They changed completely inaccurate about most of the things in television shows.
Some books and read and say, hey, the country is screwed up.
Yeah, well, that you guys will. And pass it. I hope that I'm messing enough to see this image that I'm telling you right now needs to get out, because this is true. This history that's happening. This is the real. This is looking into a clock or a watch and seeing all the colors.
Schools. Well, remember,
Yeah, and it's not true. And unless we do something together mutually and share this, we're screwed. I have to give respect also to the older generations. I am probably one of the generations that will be doing what I'm doing right now, sacrificing my career. I used to be a Hollywood sound editor. I was going to make 6 figures before I gave that up to free documentaries because I started seeing all this. And there's not very many of me out there. That's what you're saying. And after my generation, I mean, that's what Common Core is designed to do. That's why this is so important. And that's why getting social media is like a petition. You know, we all go petition begging on one knee. Please, politicians, change this, do this, do that. A petition has absolutely no legal weight whatsoever. You send an email, you send a letter, no legal weight whatever. The only way you can do anything to government is, but nobody knows that. And nobody has the wherewithal to do it. So, to get people into the social media, on the internet, in the entertainment realm, and we're going to focus their efforts in here. This doesn't really exist. It's not real. Right? The whole world. I mean, this whole virtual world is growing by leaps and bounds. It's beautiful. I mean, the trees look real. The streams look real. The demons, they all sound and look real. That's what I used to do as a sound designer. The world is falling apart. Society is falling apart. They want kids to grow up with computers.
I had kids over there.
or you.
It's, well, they'll probably come up with virtual parents eventually. I mean, exactly. All right, so some other corporate partners, School Improvement Network, in 1991 by teachers. A private association school network provides the most independent, on-demand, comprehensive research-based school time. Mostly virtual, like Common Core 60 is one of them. Amplify, Apple computers, integrated the personal computer. Corporations are bidding against each other to get government contracts. Right? Intel Corporation. You can't have a computer without a motherboard, without microchips. K-12 is a technology-based education company. You ever heard of an education company? These things didn't exist before the privatization of the education system. No one in the right mind would build an education company to build products for a system that's traded on the stock market. These are all things that have been coming around through the privatization started. Metametrics. Listen to this. Privately held education company develops scientific-based measures of student achievement, link assessment with instruction, foster better educational practices, and improve learning by students and challenge their abilities. Listen to this word. I don't even think I've ever heard of it. The company's team of psychometricians developed
a Lexile framework for reading, Lexile.com. I mean, a quantile framework for mathematics, and it just goes on, metametrics. What is a psychometrician here? No?
Somebody screwed the brain.
Well, psycho, yeah. Scholastic Learning has now partnered with and is producing stuff in Common Core. Personally, I don't trust Texas Instruments, another competitor. Calculators. Every kid should have a calculator. They have Texas Instruments Educational Activity Solutions. You see, they're big sub-corporations strictly based on education products, for-profit products that taxpayers pay for the Common Core system. International Business Machine Corporation, what is that? IBM. IBM Global Education, that's their name. Collaborates with schools, departments of education, creative business and technology solution. Now, a lot of it has nothing to do with education. We're going to talk about a really important corporation called CORE. A lot of this, and remember, Council of Chief State School Officers is a lobby group that lobbies themselves. Education decision to approve the California District Core waiver, and the last sentence said, ultimately, this decision highlights the critical need for Congress to act swiftly to reauthorize the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. That the very people who created Core are lobbying to pass their own standards using some creative manufactured problem reaction solution and using that to justify passing a federal law that says Common Core standards are understand again. Create the law, come back, becomes the point where they're lobbying Congress itself, which is really ridiculous when you think about it, because it's basically organized crime. Again, they're not stupid. This is the goal. Pass it federally unless you pass it on. I mean, I'm sure that they have think tanks where hundreds and hundreds of people just sit around all different ways. We're all completely subverting to anything this country stands for or used to stand for. It's not the public-private partnership model and core education and solution. Obviously, it's a core. This is a company based in India with headquarters. Its financial report is actually in English, but it's done in Indian. I want to say rupees. That's it. So it's an Indian corporation, but they have subsidiaries in the United States and ones in Atlanta, I think one's in New York. Core Education Consulting Solutions. Working with schools. We're talking about staffing of teachers. Staffing of teachers. Now, if you hire out a company to do the hiring for you, teachers, and you wash your hands of it, so now you have a company that's based on hiring the teachers for the entire state or district. Well, guess what? What a wonderful way to ensure that the teachers that you hire, like you said, are Common Core standard ready. They're not going to teach what Aldous Huxley was. They're not going to teach a lot of history that we learned when we grew up. My history books were that good. But if you control the hiring of teachers, then you control the information that's getting to students. Perfect example of what you're talking about. History will be demolished because it is not up to Common Core standards. Simple as that. If you control big economies, you control children. Not least, just so you know, Obama was very happy and highlighted Georgia's pre-K system powered by intensify their human capital formation. Rising nations across the world are increasingly investing in education. Invest in education for continued development of their human capital. Okay, government as human capital, it's not referring to you as a living human being. It's some actuary report that says how much money you're made according to which education path you take. Your commodity. Okay, people can never be assigned to human or partial souls, if you will. The responsibility to shape young minds, prepare them for a new world, rests on education. And again, education is capitalized. We're not talking about the actual act of educating children. We're talking about a for-profit industry on the stock market called education. We're not talking about natural aspect of educating people. We're talking about business. Quote, the world needs to renounce angel practices in its education to adopt a futuristic. He said that reinventing our education system in line with the unfolding realities of the 21st century. Those realities in 2021. Measures equally poised to help nations enhance the productive capability of workforce and create immense value for all stakeholders over the coming decades. Immense value for stakeholders. This is a business. Help nations enhance their capabilities of the future workforce. What's that mean? That's treating people to think or how to analyze with a trivium, your grammar, your logic, your rhetoric, the classic liberal arts. No. It's training how to be a good citizen of the world, work citizen. Let me read you from Aldous Huxley, Brave New World. This is one of the most true fiction. A really efficient totalitarian state over which the all-powerful executive of political bosses, their armed managers control the population of slaves who do not have to be cougars. They love their servitude. To make them love it is the task assigned in present-day totalitarian states to ministers of propaganda, newspaper editors, and school teachers. Most men and women will grow up to love their servitude and will never dream of revolution. Now, like the guy was talking about,
Right, I'm into the screen. Agenda 21. Can we
Will abuse their authority by intrigue to promote their own benefit or that of friends rather than the public good.
really want to know what's going on in the world? Educate your bloody self. I'll put up this bloody hacking site and radiate me at the same time. Yeah, you can tell the demonic demons around. So, I'm ending this.